call unto thee, O Lord, and send thou my life to guide us, for we are weak and afraid, and we lack knowledge. There is no one to hear your plea, no one to answer you, no one to ease your suffering. Lord, have mercy upon us.
Hey, welcome to the NY Patriot Show. Here we delve deep into the abyss, covering topics such as occultism, spirituality, secret societies, conspiracies, and the unknown. Join us in trying to put these pieces together and figuring all this shit out. The NY Patriot Show. Hey everyone, welcome back to the NY Patriot Show. I have a listener on who I've had on before and did a great job when he was on, and had told me that he wanted to come back on and cover another topic. And since he did so well the first time, I figured, fuck it, why not? I'll have him back on again. I have my buddy over here, Ron. Ron, would you like to say what's up to everybody? Especially to the Element chat, they all know who you are.
Yeah, we're pretty active over there in Element. I've been a little busy lately, but yeah, if you ever want to jump in and chat with all of us, join the Element server. We have a good time there. Yeah,
it definitely looks like it. definitely active. That for sure, I think. And not to try to promote that real quick, but if you haven't checked out our Element server yet, definitely check it out. It's in the links. So definitely check it out, like I said, and Ron's in there with a couple other people who are always dropping a lot of good info, and there's tons of different topics and groups. So, yeah, go check that out, and now I'll let Ron go. Thank you.
All right. So today I came on to talk about the bicameral mind, and what that means is that the mind operates in two different hemispheres. You got the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. They're each responsible for their own tasks, and they can... Oh, thank you, Eric. And they can
I forgot you can see that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all good. The interaction with people during the shows is the best part.
Fuck yeah.
So I based a lot of my research off of this book. Let's see. There we go. The Origin of Consciousness in the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. It's written by Julian Jaynes. And this book was published in the 70s, so some of the information might be a little bit outdated. Julian Jaynes was a professor of psychology at Princeton in the 70s. So he did a lot of experiments. He had a lot of access to...
I'm sure he did.
Well, he did some pretty crazy experiments that we'll talk about. So when I first started researching Julian Jaynes himself, I found that there's now a Julian Jaynes Society that you can join online. Just my take looking at it, it seemed like somebody else trying to make a couple bucks off of Julian Jaynes' name. It didn't really seem like there was anything.
That's even kind of like when we covered the Fellowship of Friends, how we said that cult leader kind of like ripped off that other dude and used his shit to, make money, in my opinion.
But the Julian Jaynes Society, it feels like it's mostly just a scam. Somebody trying to make a couple bucks off of Julian Jaynes' work and his name. I didn't really see any reason that I would want to join that. But that's neither here nor there. So the premise of the book, it takes a look at consciousness and how consciousness operates within the brain. And so, like you've said before, that the brain and the mind are two different things.
Oh, yeah.
And the physical brain may be a tool to use for the mind, but the mind is its own thing. It's separate from the physical brain. And
would you think maybe the mind is a little bit like your soul, actually, in a sense?
I definitely think it's related and connected.
Yeah,
to your soul. I think that your brain is more important for like physical functions, controlling my heartbeat and my lungs and my intestines, my digestive tract, so that it can keep me alive.
It's there so I can walk and shit.
Yeah. It keeps the organism running so that the mind can still operate. And so with the mind, that's what is actually interacting with consciousness or possibly producing consciousness.
I agree with you, Ron. Totally.
And do
you think the brain, real quick, I'm real sorry, just one more question. Do you think the brain might be like used for like storage of memories too? Or maybe like contacts and like, I don't know, I guess storage of memory is the best way to say it.
Yeah, like the hard drive of a computer. It holds the information to be accessed later.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, cool. All right, go ahead. Sorry about that.
And then taking a look at consciousness, like there's a big difference between being conscious and just being alert. Because like you get hit in the head and they say you lose consciousness, but that would imply that just being alert is having consciousness. Whereas you could think about when you drive to work and you've driven back and forth 1,000 times. You're thinking about something else. You're not even thinking about the drive to work. You make that left turn without even realizing that you made the left turn. Suddenly you're in the parking lot and you don't even remember the drive there. So you weren't actually conscious of what it is that you were doing on that drive to work. You were alert, however, you were not conscious and participating in the acts that you were doing. So I think that's a pretty important distinction.
You know what's interesting that you mentioned that is that I've read Judith. I forgot her name. Judith McCarthy, I think. And I've heard James Wasserman say even himself when it comes to rituals, like after doing them for so long, it should almost be kind of like where you don't even have to think and it's natural. And in my opinion, you're driving to work the same way every day is ritualistic as doing the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram every morning.
Yeah, and it kind of gets you in the mind space where you can accomplish more. If you can perform, you got that muscle memory that you can just get in your car and drive, and you don't even have to think about turning on the left turn signal. Yeah, I mean, most of the people in Florida don't turn on their turn signal. But like you don't even think about it, so you're able to accomplish more. You can think about the tasks that you need to get done for the day during your day at work, and you can plan that out. So the ability to perform tasks while being alert, however not conscious of them, is kind of a benefit because you can get more than one thing done at a time. And same thing with you talking about the LBRP. You can go through the motions, say what you need to say, do your ritual, and your mind is already kind of set in that space that you want it to be at the end of the ritual, so you can actually perform and accomplish what you're trying to accomplish.
Yep.
Yeah. So when taking a look at the bicameral mind, one of the really important features is the distinction of which side of the brain controls speech. And so in most let's just assume that everyone in the world is right-handed, because this will be a lot easier to describe if I'm not trying to jump back and forth between left-handed and right-handed people. And roughly five out of every 6 people are right-handed.
Oh wow! Okay.
So you weird lefties out there skewing all of our data. So the speech centers of normal right-handed people is controlled in the left hemisphere of the brain. So some of the experiments that he conducted will show that somebody that had a brain injury at a young age to the left hemisphere of the brain, their speech their brain will compensate, and they'll start to develop speech in the right hemisphere of the brain. It's kind of a coping mechanism. But barring any major brain damage, the speech centers are controlled in the left hemisphere of the brain. So some other really weird experiments that he did, he would take probes and stimulate the right hemisphere of the brain. And when he would do this, when he would stimulate the right hemisphere, people would start hearing voices.
Wow.
Like a schizophrenic, or they would start hearing the voices of some of their dead relatives. They would start hearing the voices of other people in their lives, and they would call out, like they would, "Grandpa, come here!" Like they think that they are hearing the voices of their dead relatives when the right side of their brain is stimulated. So that showed that there is some speech capability contained in the right hemisphere of the brain as well. We just don't actually use it right now. All the rest of what you and I are doing right now, assuming that we're both right-handed, is all contained in the left hemisphere of the brain. That's what's being used for you and I to talk to each other and to listen.
Yeah, I was thinking before, there's even like things that I've looked at, like I've looked into like parts of the brain in the eyes and stuff, just for trying to like figure out just occult things that I've come across. And I've even noticed, I think, like even with your eyesight, don't they kind of like my right eye would actually be going, I think, being red in my left side of my brain. They seem to cross, I think, actually. Don't they?
Yes. Pretty much everything on the left side of your body is controlled by the right hemisphere of the brain and vice versa. So all of us right-handed people, that's our right hand or our right foot is being controlled by the left hemisphere of the brain. Most processes cross from one side to the other. I don't know why that is.
Yeah, that fucks me up because like Eric even said in the chat, and that's something I used to think, like right hand and left hand path. I used to think like kind of maybe the one side and this and that, whatever. Like he was, I guess, trying to show the difference between the left side and the right side of the body. But then when I started realizing when things switch inside the brain, does that fuck that all up now? You know what I'm saying? Because now it's not technically, it was the left here, but not once it got up in here. Now it switches to the right. So I'm like, does that fuck everything all up now?
You have to remember that everything crosses. And so I think that also translates to the pillars of the tree of life. So that you've got the left pillar, the feminine pillar. It's controlled by the right side of the brain. So the more feminine aspects like creativity, being emotional, those things are held in the right hemisphere of the brain, whereas the logic, the what's the word I'm looking for? The more logical aspect is controlled on the left hemisphere of the brain. And so when you've got the two hemispheres, they're connected in the center by an organ known as the hypothalamus. And something really interesting that I found is when you take a cross-section, cut straight down the middle of the brain, and lay it open, if you look at the hypothalamus, it actually resembles the symbol, the Eye of Ra.
Yeah, I've seen that
symbol that we see all the time. I'm not sure if that's intentional or not, but I found that very interesting.
Well, you know why I was even looking. I started looking into like the brain and the ears and the eyes and stuff because I was coming across symbolism that I thought actually might have represented inside your body. So I mean, I wouldn't totally discredit. I probably think there might be something to that with the fact that the Eye of Ra looks like it's inside the middle of your brain.
Well, and I've also seen, a lot of the old symbolism that'll line up with the chakra points. So I think that we have a lot of symbolism that represents what's going on inside of our body, and not maybe not necessarily on the surface level, but those deeper understandings that we're trying to figure out. The chakra points, how the tree of life can line up with certain points of the body.
When you were looking up stuff like the brain and you came across that eye being in the middle, did you come across anything where it looked like a small person, or like arms and legs and a head on one side of the brain and then showing it on the other? They would call that the homunculus. Did you come across any of that?
It kind of looked like the Vitruvian Man that Da Vinci drew. If you remember that symbol where the dude's got 4 arms, 2 this way and 2 this way, and then his legs.
Yes.
Which also kind of reminds me of the Yggdrasil. I'm sure I pronounced that wrong. The Yggdrasil.
Yeah, I wouldn't know how to even say that.
I just read it and I say what comes to mind.
Well, as you can tell, I do the same. Whatever comes out, that's what it says.
Yeah.
No, the reason I asked that is because I have come across pictures of that, which does make me think it's like I've heard of like a small little man being referenced to that part, and I have come across things that show that, and it, like I've said before, and I know I mention it all the time with Twin Peaks, I really do think that's what the little man is inside the Red Room at times. I think he's just playing that middle part of the brain.
Well, and it's also what connects the 2 hemispheres of the brain. So it allows you to access all of your brain instead of just operating in one hemisphere. So I think that kind of gives you the higher capabilities when we're talking about things like the astral travel, the astral projection, tapping into the Akashic record. Everything is contained inside of your head, and you just have to figure out how to be able to access it. I think you've said before that there's a quote from an occultist that said, everything is contained within your head. People just don't understand how big the inside of their head is.
Yeah. Juan Milo Duquette, he said, magic, it's all in your head. You just have no idea how big your head is or something like that, yeah. And I think, as much as he does come across as a very silly man and always got funny stories, I think he says some real deep shit, and people take it as jokes. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's a real good way to put information out there while still covering it up. So you got your revelation of the method going, and you can say, we tried to tell you, we tried to show you, it's all right here, and you just didn't pay attention to it.
Yeah.
So looking more at some of the experiments that he did and some of the research that he did to support his hypothesis of the voices in the right hemisphere of the brain, he took a look back at like ancient literature, ancient texts. And so one thing that he found very interesting was back during the age of the Greeks, when taking a look at the Iliad or the Odyssey, those type of texts, I don't know. Man, I'm drawing a blank this morning.
It's all right.
Anyway, those ancient texts, the Iliad and the Odyssey, he found that people did not have an inner monologue. So when I'm thinking in my head, I'm hearing a voice too. I hear it as my own voice. I would imagine that most people do, but I've never asked.
I hear it in your voice when I think, Ron.
I don't blame you. It's a smooth, sexy voice. Yeah. So instead of the inner monologue, the characters would be hearing the voices of the gods, whether it be Athena or Ares, guiding them. So they would hear these voices of the gods, and it would guide them into battle. It would tell them what to do. And so, to me, those voices of the gods sound like archetypes. And us being the crazy occultists that we are, I would believe that archetypes would all be contained within our head. They're internal. They're not external.
I think you nailed it right there, Ron. That is something that I actually totally believe. I think that's why I even think Crowley even says himself, slave to the gods. He says people will slave to the gods because they are going to take them as literal beings or literal things, and not realize that they're just actually aspects of their own mind that they can tap into.
Right. They can tap into them, and they can use the guidance. They can better their own station by embracing the archetypes, taking the important aspects of one archetype and applying it to whatever situation, however, not being controlled by them.
Yes. Yep.
And so it kind of showed an evolution in the human mind, because before the earliest writing that we have, the earliest text that we have, would be like the ancient Sumerians, the Code of Hammurabi. So obviously there were humans before that. Excuse me. Why were they not writing? I understand that there's a certain point to where a written language is established, but before so that shows an evolution in the consciousness, in the desire to portray information from one person to another. Before that, everything would have had to have been word of mouth. So with that evolution of consciousness, we have to ask, what spurred that evolution of consciousness? Is it a natural process, or was there some intervention there?
Maybe we just used to use our minds to talk, and then somebody duped us into reading writing.
I've thought about that as well.
As far out there as that sounds. No, don't use this anymore. Use these, and look at that. Don't listen to that anymore.
Well, we know, we're starting to understand now that ancient cultures were much more advanced than we realize, such as the discoveries in the Denisovan caves in like Siberia. They found bracelets that made out of jade, that the marks on them only could have been made by a high-speed, like a drill press. It's something that cannot have been made by handmade tools. It had to be a high-speed rotating something like a drill press. And these artifacts are something like 33,000 years old. So how in the world are these people making these items way long ago with a high-speed drill press? Unless they were more advanced than we realize, and we lost some technology. And then you can take a look at places like Göbekli Tepe, where they have the stones that are perfectly molded together. It kind of looks like they were melted and formed into place. All these ancient sites point to the fact that we were more technologically advanced than we realized, and then that technology was lost. So, so some people have argued that, like, the voices of the gods in people's heads, that was the beginning of the internal monologue, our own voices that we hear. But people before that had not heard those voices before, so it was kind of a novel idea to them. So that would be something that they would want to write about, that they would want to catalog. But then later on in the writings, the characters would say things like, "Oh, why have the gods forsaken me?" And they stop hearing the voices of the gods. So that makes me think that we kind of had a shift in consciousness from just having the internal voices being contained in the right hemisphere of the brain, being those voices of the gods, and then it transitioned over into our own thoughts, our own internal monologue. So I'm not sure what the catalyst for that change would be, but there's a pretty marked shift in the literature of the time, and you can look across multiple different societies and see that shift all around the same time. It's in the Greek literature, it's in more Eastern literature. You see that shift from the gods directing and guiding people, and then they have their own internal monologues.
That's kind of interesting to me. I listened to this guy Steve I, a guitar player, and he has an album called Sex and Religion, and it's in my opinion, all his stuff, in my opinion, is kind of like deeply occulted, if you understand what he's saying. But in that album, there is one song, I think it's called like Deep Down in the Pain or something like that. And there is a part of it where it's like a lady giving childbirth, You can hear it, like in the, I don't know if it's in a hospital or home or wherever it is. But like before the child comes out, like there's stuff in the background. Whereas if you're listening to the soul of the child having a conversation with God before it pops out, and God's even telling him like, "You're going to hate me. You're going to curse me. Your life's going to fucking suck." But like telling him what's up and what's about to happen already, and you're gonna forget about me. You're not gonna fucking hear me anymore. But I'm still gonna be here. And he's like telling him that before he pops out, and I'm like, "Fuck!" That almost kind of sounds like the whole dialogue that you're saying now.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
You'll have to shoot me that
definitely.
information later so I can check it out. Oh, I just lost my next thought.
I fucked you all up with that one. Sorry.
That's okay. So other things that would support this theory of the voices in the head being contained in the right hemisphere and kind of going away. If you look back at Babylon, the people in their houses, they would have chambers underneath their houses, and whenever they would have a relative die, they would put that relative downstairs in their basement, I guess, if you want to call it that. But they would like have them sitting up in a chair, and they would send them food. They would have like chutes where they could drop food down, and so there would be piles of food with these dead relatives down there. And so why would you be feeding your dead relatives unless you're hearing their voices? So that was just a little bit more. That was a pretty crazy thing to read.
Wow. Yo, imagine that.
Yeah, but that reminds me of the how Julian Jaynes was stimulating the right hemisphere of these people's brains, and they would hear the voices of their dead relatives. So
I meant to ask you before, real quick. Do you know, like, or unless it was something you're going to go into later, or if it's too long to go into, do you know kind of how did he explain how he kind of stimulated the brain? Like what technique?
Well, that's what I wanted to know, because a lot of these experiments that he discussed, they sounded pretty horrific. Like, how many people are running around out there with brain damage in the left hemisphere of their brain at a young age? You can't just do one experiment on one person and say that that's how it's going. You have to have multiple corroborating events of evidence. You
don't just do like 2 or 3. I mean, unless it's for like the COVID vaccine.
Especially as a Princeton professor, you should know the scientific method, and that you need to be able to repeat your results for it to be a conclusive study.
Yeah, and like, is that something that's like when you turn it on, does it shut off? You know what I'm saying? Like, when you were doing this to people, did it go off? Like, were you connecting something to them and it just turned it on and off? Did it get stuck on? Was there damage done? Yeah, that's very interesting.
Did they start hearing voices for the rest of their life, and you just made this person a schizophrenic?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Fuck.
But those were some of the questions that I had. Like, who are you experimenting on with all of these brain damaged people? Who are you shoving probes into their brain? It didn't really explain that very well, but it made me question their methods. So going back to the Sumerians, they would also find a ton of these small idols, like little dolls, just handheld dolls. So he postulated that they would make these little dolls so that they would have a source for these voices that they're hearing. They start hearing these voices and they talk to the doll that's in their hand. But after these civilizations, we would see far fewer of these little sculptures. I mean, that's kind of a guess at what the purpose of these dolls was for. But with the large amount of these little idols that he was finding, it was just a little bit more supporting evidence to this theory. So when I take a look at these kinds of things, we hear the voices of the gods coming out of the right hemisphere. We hear the voices of these dead relatives. I kind of, in my head, I assign that as like the God hemisphere, the right hemisphere being the God hemisphere, and the left hemisphere being the man hemisphere. Man being human, not male and female. And so when we take a look at like our occult practices, we want to try and connect, like you're invoking the names of the gods, so you're trying to tap into that right hemisphere and connect it with the human hemisphere, so that the human, whoever is doing the rituals, can connect with the gods and use those powers, I guess you can say, those abilities. Like when you're invoking Thoth or Mercury, you're hoping to use the ability of Mercury to use the gift of Gab, to be a slick salesman. So that hypothalamus is kind of, it's what connects the left and the right hemisphere of the brain. So I would believe that hypothalamus to be like the gateway to the gods. And so maybe our transcendental meditations, maybe our gateway project when we're listening to the binaural beats or the hemisync tapes, if that is a way to connect the two hemispheres, that is a way to connect man with the gods, or tapping into the spirit realm, the Akashic record, however you want to say it. When you had described crossing the abyss, is that what we're doing? Are we crossing from the left hemisphere through the hypothalamus into the right hemisphere?
Yeah, no, I think that myself. Fuck, there was something I was just going to say. Oh, even when it comes to like crosses in the X, sometimes I think that like when it comes into the Kabbalah or like certain occult symbols, I do think that the X symbol may have something to do with like the crossing in your brain. You know, like even with like sight and sound and shit like that, I do think some of those symbols on the tree, because like you'll see, like you can get the cross at Malkuth, which is more like an X, and you get the cross at Tifereth, which is more of like the cross that we know of. Then like you can even get taus, and depending on which way, up or down. I mean, I've seen them upside down and shit like that. I think that all kind of has something to do with like inside yourself.
Well, and the other thing that we already discussed with the crossing is light will come in the right eye. It will be interpreted and cross over to the left hemisphere of the brain. And so you've got the X inside your own head.
See, that was another weird thing. I think when I mentioned having that issue with myself, when I ended up going to the hospital, my right pupil was fucking gigantic compared to my left one. And I've always wondered, like, what the fuck was up with that?
So if your right pupil was dilated and the left one wasn't, the right eye would be controlled by the left hemisphere of the brain. So that would tell me you were coming back from the right hemisphere into the left hemisphere, and there's more energy in the left hemisphere of the brain, and that's why you got the expansion in the right eye. I have absolutely no idea if that's true.
It was pretty cool to think about, though.
Yeah, it sounded great.
Yeah, I'll go with that one. It's better than what I've come up with. I'll take that diagnosis, Ron. It sounds
good.
Yeah.
Dr. Ron on duty.
All right. So, yeah, no, I've always wondered about that, too. Because, like, even with the whole crossing of the brain, I started thinking it doesn't necessarily mean like that was my right side of the brain that made my eye do that. I was thinking it's probably more of my left. I have wondered that before.
Right. So if you, like, on the way out, if you're astral projecting, you would be going from the left side to the right side through that hypothalamus. So coming back, it would make sense that you would go back from the right side back into the left side of the brain.
Interesting. It's fucking wild. Even Eric said X in a circle is the true mark of the beast symbol. And then even Brandy said something about when you spin the X, it's a circle, one and the same. Yeah, there is a lot of like that symbolism that I think has something to do with it.
the X in the circle is also the symbol of the X-Men.
Yeah, yeah. Malkuth on the Tree of Life, which is Earth.
And the leader of the X-Men would be Professor Xavier, whose first name starts with an X. And what's his superpower? He's the super psychic, can tap into anyone, anywhere with his mind.
Yep. And then look at the other guy, the bad guy, he's all about
Magneto?
Yeah. He's all about magnetism. That would be the other side, wouldn't it? I mean, if you want to think about it, if we're getting sucked into our left brain, then the left brain could be looked at as a magnet, pulling the right side into it.
Yeah, and like that would be more of like the science-based approach to something, the magnetism, rather than the psychic-based approach, which would be, the more emotional side. So that would be the more emotional side would represent the left pillar, being in the right hemisphere of the brain, whereas the more scientific and logic-based approach would be contained in the left hemisphere of the brain on the right pillar.
Yes. Sorry, I was looking at too much going on in the chat.
that's a good problem to have.
It does actually sidetrack me sometimes, and I feel bad. Yeah, people will be talking, I'll be looking at the chat and totally disregard everything they just said for 2 minutes.
No, that's good stuff. Like I said, the best part of these shows is the interaction with the chat.
Yeah, see, there's even times, and like Raven even said it here too. There's even times when me and Lux have even wondered, is it more of sucking both sides into just down the middle of the brain too, as well? But I definitely do think the problem is being in the wrong one, like you're saying.
Yeah, and that's not having the balance between the two hemispheres. And I kind of think that that's where we've been as, the human race for the past 2,000 years or whatever. We've been stuck in the left hemisphere of the brain and kind of neglecting the right hemisphere of the brain. But I would argue that we're kind of starting to see a shift in that. We've got a whole lot more people into their spirituality, a lot more people trying to tap into that right hemisphere of the brain. And so that kind of makes me believe that we're approaching that next evolution of human consciousness, kind of the next step after the other evolution that we described, where people just started getting that inner monologue. So I don't know what that means for us as a species going forward, but we've talked about the age of Aquarius before, where we're kind of entering a new age as a species. It's hard to say if we're already in it or if we're about to enter that age, but I kind of look at it as like a wave where we're at the bottom of the last age, and as you enter the new age, then you start an upswing. And I would argue that we're kind of starting an upswing. I think that more people are using their consciousness and not just going through the motions of daily life as an automaton. They're actually using those processes rather than just driving to and from work without even realizing what they're doing. I think that as a species, we've got a lot more use of the consciousness, and we're seeing that evolution. We're kind of getting to live through it and watch it in real time.
Something's definitely changing, I think, with humanity's thinking as well. I think as many as there is going up, I think unfortunately there's almost the same amount going down, which sucks. Maybe that's the way it goes. I don't know.
Well, it kind of makes me think of for every negative there's a positive.
Yeah.
So for all the people that are on their upswing, you're going to have essentially the same amount on their downswing. And unfortunately, if people can't adapt to the new age, then they're going to get left behind. Yeah,
as shitty as that sounds, and it's not even to sound like pompous to be like, oh, well, it won't be me. It could possibly still be me.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? But yeah, no, I agree with that. There was something I wanted to mention before when we were talking about the, I guess, syncing up the brains. And I'll bring it up now because there is other people in the chat now who mentioned it, going down the middle of the brain. I've often wondered, like the not the tree of life, the Kabbalistic one, but like kind of like the wicked tree, or like when you ever see other trees of life or trees involved with, magic and witchcraft. I have often thought, is the trunk actually down the middle part of your brain? And is the limbs coming out? This is why I asked you before. Do you think maybe you can tap into certain parts of your brain that maybe like will direct you somewhere else? But are like the limbs like showing you like possible roadmaps of like where you could go now into the back of your brain, the deep subconscious, and are you tapping into that and leaving that way? You know what I'm saying? Kind of like it's like the brain is like pinpointing where you're going to go out there. It's almost like the roadmaps in here, and then you would just go out. It's hard to. It's like the GPS, I guess.
And I even think when you're looking at the tree of life itself, you've got the left pillar, you got the right pillar, and then you have 3 spheres in the center. You've got Malkuth, Doth, and Kether. So the Doth would be returning from the abyss, right?
Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah, I could be wrong. That's my.
I think that's when you've achieved gnosis. You know what's out there because you've come back from it.
Yeah, because I think knowledge is associated with that sphere, which, in my opinion, you would know once you've achieved.
Right, and so once you come back through the hypothalamus in the center of the brain, and so I think that they're showing, they're showing the left, the right, and there is the center. And I think that we also see that in the left-hand path, the right-hand path, and the middle path. We've got that in the pillars of Yaakam and Boaz. We've got, you have the left pillar, the right pillar, and the learned man is supposed to walk the middle path. So we have those three paths, those three pillars. And I think that shows that, you have to be able to act, you have to be able to jump back and forth. You have to be able to use all 3 of those areas in order to kind of, I don't know, be more conscious and be more mindful. Yeah. You have to use that balance.
That's a good way to say it, Ron.
And I think that it also shows, like when you use the hemisync tapes or the binaural beats, you can access both sides at the same time, and those might be a little aid, a little something to help you be able to access multiple parts at one time.
Yeah, isn't the way that works is because you have 2 different frequencies, and then down the middle it kind of meets in the middle, and so then you're actually really got 3 different sounds. Like,
yes, and so you got one sound, one tone on the right side, one tone on the left side, and when they meet in the middle, I haven't done studies on this because I'm not a Princeton professor that has all kinds of damaged test subjects to work on.
I only know from reading the Gateway shit. That's the only reason I've even heard of this too.
So I would imagine when they meet in the middle, like you kind of average them out.
That's what it said. Yeah, like it was like I would. Just an example. Let's say one was 50 in one ear and one was 70 in the other ear. Down the middle will be 60 in the middle of your brain.
So yes, you're activating all 3 different parts at once, and that kind of achieves that goal of crossing realms. Being able to, if you can access all 3 parts at once, and activate your entire brain, and not just living in the left hemisphere or the right hemisphere, that gives you access to more abilities within yourself.
Gotcha. Yeah, I agree with that. And I was even wondering, is that how, like, that's why another reason why I had even asked if the book mentioned, like, how this person was doing these studies. Because I was wondering, like, were they trying to use sound, just stimulating one side of the brain? Were they using, like, EMF? But I could see sound. Sound, I'm sure you could still do it with that.
I'm sure you could. His experiments described using electric probes. So, like, I don't know.
Oh, God damn.
Does that? Yeah, that sounds like you're drilling into the skull and sticking an electrode in there. I don't know if that's actually how they did it or not.
Just fucking tasing the guy's right side of the head.
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh man.
Which makes me wonder about the ethical practices, the ethics of these experiments. I don't know. I can't answer.
There's got to
that
be
question.
a German scientist in there somewhere.
James doesn't sound German. I don't know. I haven't studied the etymology of the name James.
It just seems like they're always the ones like fucking us with some weird shit.
Yeah, well,
I even covered. I don't think we did it with Lee, and I don't think we released it on our end yet. But like we covered Travis Taylor, and I was even covering like how even when Werner von Braun came over here, like the shit that he was using to like that foam shit that he was using for the rocket fuel, like basically once it got burnt off, caused carcinogenic shit. I was we still had a fucking Nazi scientist coming over here helping us create better bombs and poison fucking people at the same time. I mean, fucking genius.
Oh, yeah.
What the fuck? I'm going to go over there, help them, and poison the fucking people still at the same time. Wow.
Well, I mean, Operation Paperclip brought over all kinds of Nazi scientists. So, who knows who integrated where and what projects they worked on later on. I'm sure there are plenty of Nazi scientists that we've never heard their name, but they got integrated into our universities, and who knows what they could have done.
Yeah, and the only reason I even Valiant Thor, holy shit, Colorado Dank just said Valiant Thor. I haven't read that name in fucking years. You know who he is, Ron Diggity?
Yeah, I want to say
has
that
6
was
fingers
an
and said he was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh fuck! I totally forgot what I was gonna say. He threw me off with Valiant Thor. Fuck. Oh, sorry, Ron. I had something else to throw in there. I saw that. It threw me off.
So you said Travis Taylor.
Oh yeah, the only reason I even came across that is because his father worked with Werner von Braun, and I was looking into like the places that they worked at, and like I forgot the name of the place offhand. It's in the episode, but there's like a place that they worked at that they were like working on all this shit to help propulsion and fuel and this foam type of fuel that he had. This place that they used to do the testing at now, you can't even fucking put anything there, and they got to dig every like 6 months or a year and test the site because it's filled with like carcinogenic agents now that got burned off from the fucking fuel. And I was like, the fuck? I was like, of course Werner von Braun came over here and still stuck us in the ass with chemicals. Why the government thought he was doing them a favor.
Well, we got all the fluoride in the water, which we only started doing that after the Nazis did it in the concentration camps to keep their people docile. So that's a practice that came over after Operation Paperclip as well. But
sorry to get off the topic with that.
Is that the same Travis Taylor that was working with the Bledsoe family after their...
Oh, it's the guy from Skinwalker Ranch.
I think that's the same guy.
Yeah, we covered him because he's a very shady character in himself. Like his whole family was like neither like NASA or military.
Yeah, I think that's the same guy that worked with the Bledsoe family, and so they have those stories of the light beings. What I mean, you could call them extraterrestrials because you always see the glowing orbs. That's one of the you got the Foo Fighters back in World War II, where those were glowing orbs. There's all kinds of glowing orbs at Skinwalker Ranch. And so you could look at them as UFOs. You could look at them as angels. When they interacted with the Bledsoe family, it sounded more like what you would expect an angel to be speaking with you. But you'll get a kick out of this. The name of the main entity was Hathor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I figured that name would ring a bell with you.
Yeah, of course.
But to me, all of those things, those are not external forces. Those are internal forces that we discussed, the archetypes that you are manifesting out into the real world. So,
that's even another thing real quick, and it just makes me think of like how the crosses gets played off, I think, for showing symbolism on things. If you notice, there is a lot of fucking gods that also have an H in front of their name that have to do with crossing both worlds.
Hathor, Hecate,
Heimdall. I mean, Horus, I would even say, I mean, to an extent. But there's a lot of H's, and I do think that shows, like, a connection or a separation of two things.
Well, and also with Horus was the other Egyptian god that had one of his eyes gouged out. Mm-hmm. So when we're taking a look at the Eye of Ra, if you mirror it, it would also be the Eye of Horus. So maybe that's when you slice that hypothalamus in half, maybe Horus is the mirror image of Ra.
Yeah, I noticed, you know what, what really got me noticing that, believe it or not, is I go to see him because of the occult content. I'll be totally honest with you. I'm not a fan of the fact that Marvel is owned by Disney now. But, I mean, I do go see those movies sometimes because I do think it's like fucking watching a thelemic fairy tale. I saw the Love and Thunder, whatever the fuck it was. Whatever. I saw that. And just in that, I started noticing, I'm like, yo, what's up with all these motherfuckers with H's in their fucking front of as the first letter? And they all have something to do with, like, they're the in-between of both worlds, or they could travel between both worlds. I just even started noticing in that. And then I started thinking when I got home of other ones. I'm like, yo, there's something up with that fucking H, I swear.
Well, and who was well, when you look at a capital H, you've got a left pillar, you've got a right pillar, and you've got a cross in between the two.
Yeah, I even think sometimes that's even the whole, like, you know, I know at one point people were pointing at, what the fuck is her name? God, she was big on the fucking last MTV movie, Taylor Swift. She had one music video, I know, where she had a bunch of bridges in it, and people were like, oh, that's fucking, you know, a symbol of something. And I think that's the same thing, really.
Yeah,
it could look like a bridge. You just don't have that little fucking thing in there. It's the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and looking at the Greek pantheon, who was the messenger of the gods that traveled back and forth between man and the gods? Hermes. Mm-hmm. And so now we've got...
Hercules.
Now we've got Hermeticism based on the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus. So that's kind of connecting the realm of the gods with the realm of man, or the right hemisphere with the left hemisphere.
Yeah, that was like even another thing. Like, I think at the end of the movie, if you stayed long enough for the credits to go, like, I think like the gods, like Ra, was like, I think, pissed off at because I don't mean, fuck it, I'm giving parts of the movie away. I forgot who it was. It might have been Thor. I think he like fucking threw a spear into Ra, and you thought he killed him. And I was like, I'm not
going to see the movie anyway, so don't worry about it.
So I was even like, yo, that's that easy to kill Ra? You just threw a fucking spear into him? I was like, all right, I guess. And then at the end of the movie, Ra comes back, you know, fat, who was that guy in The Gladiator? It's him, fat, with an Italian accent.
Gerard something.
Whatever.
Gerard Butler.
No, forgot his name.
I don't know.
It's him playing Ra. He comes back and he's like, I think he basically, you know, sends out Hercules after them. I'm like, again, someone coming from one end going to the next with an H. I was like, what the fuck? I don't know. It just seems really weird.
That's interesting. I'd never thought of the H before, but I mean, we've talked about how letters are symbols or sigils, and so that representation of, you know, the left pillar, the right pillar, and the connecting bridge in between the two of them, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. That sometimes I even think that's why Isis is sitting on her throne. It's just used as Binah. Or Hathor could go there too, but I think Isis would be like kind of once you've passed Hathor and now you're going down the middle. Now it's just an I instead of an H. You're going down the middle of the brain.
And then you have
those S's could be going in between both sides with the I down the middle. You know, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You want to get weird. Or they're both pillars and some shit, but I do think the letters, even when they get translated over into English from one language to another, the reason why it's even spelt a certain way in this language is still to represent something going on in the brain.
Yeah, and
Russell Crowe, that's who it was. Sorry.
Russell Crowe, okay. He kind of looks like Gerard Butler, so I'm gonna. And so, man, just lost my train of thought.
Yeah, I can do that.
I don't know.
I can do that. So, what else? I'm sure I probably took you off your course plenty of times. Was there other stuff from that book that you did want to cover too?
Those were kind of the main points that I thought were relevant to, what we discuss, what you discuss on your show. I think that it's kind of a roadmap to be able to access more parts of your brain when you understand what all is happening inside your head, inside your brain. That kind of activates your mind more. And when we talk about how the two are separated, the physical brain and the mind, I think that there are still, the mind is tied to the brain, but it's separate from the brain. And so making sure to activate all parts of the brain will improve the mind and how the mind works.
I'm going to try to share this if I can. It's not my fucking computer, so I don't know if I'll be doing this correct. Here we go. Can you see that?
Yeah.
It's like a motherfucking frog to me.
It does look like a frog.
Yep. That's why all hell breaks loose when the frog shows up in that movie Mother. Because now you're totally enthralled into your fucking vision and your brain in this world. And your hearing.
So there's another good representation of how everything's crossing. Another one of the experiments that he was doing is they would have someone with an injury to the left hemisphere of the brain. So they would cover up the right eye and show a picture of something, or they would show the word, let's say, eraser. And but they would only show it to the left eye. They would have it covered up. So when the person would try to search out that object, the eraser, that they were just shown the word eraser, they would only use the hand that was associated with the hemisphere of the brain that was shown that picture. So if they showed the word eraser to the right eye, that would be controlled by the left hemisphere of the brain, so they would also use the right hand.
That's weird.
Whereas if they would show that image or show the word to the left eye, they would use the left hand to search out that object. And they would tell people that they were only able to use, if they would show it to the left, if they would show the word to the left eye and tell the person that they're only able to use the right hand, they would be unable to do it.
Wow.
Yeah, and they would just flash the word eraser, and then it would go away. So that would kind of be that short-term memory storage. But if they were able to use the same hand as the eye that word was shown to, then they would be able to perform the task. So there's more connection between the hemispheres, the hemisphere of the brain controlling that. There we go. There's the hypothalamus, the thalamus, and the hypothalamus, looking like the eye of Ra.
Yeah, just figured I'd throw it up on this. You mentioned it before, yeah.
Oh, that. Can you bring that last image back up?
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna see if I can try to actually click on it, bring it up like better looking. Shit, hold on one second. I wish I was on my own computer. I'd be able to bring up. I had some like really, really good stuff that I probably could have used.
So that there's another really great book that ties into. I think it kind of builds off of the concepts of this book. So that inner bird that we're looking at, that's the essentially the brain stem. That's what people refer to as the lizard brain. That part of the brain was developed first in other, not mammals, but other animals. And so Carl Sagan wrote a great book called The Dragons of Eden. And
I read that a long time ago.
Great book. And so when we talk about the lizard brain, that brain stem, that inner bird that we're looking at here, that was the lizard brain. That was what was developed first. So that contains all your motor functions and all of your reactionary aspects of your brain. And so that's what a lizard works off of. It says, I'm hungry, I'm going to go find an insect to eat. There's danger there, I'm going to run away. And so the rest of the brain was built around that brainstem there. And that's when you see the increase in cranium size with hominid species, is when that the rest of the brain, the outer brain, is growing around that lizard brain, the brainstem. So I think that those two books relate really well together and kind of build the Dragons of Eden builds off of the concepts of the origin of consciousness and the breakdown of the bicameral mind, which it was also really strange for Carl Sagan to be writing a book about the evolution of the brain. Like, aren't you a astrophysicist? What does that have to do with astrophysics?
I think you know a lot.
Yes, he did know a lot.
Yeah,
and you could see a shift in what he would speak about throughout his life, and there was a very clear demarcation of when he would speak about extraterrestrials, and he in the beginning of his career he would almost say that it was a certainty, just due to the sheer size of the universe and how many stars and planets are out there. It's almost mathematically impossible for there not to be extraterrestrials interacting with us. But then toward the end of his career, he would say, no, it's not likely that we've ever come in contact with extraterrestrials. And I think that something that he kind of came to the conclusion of, but he didn't want to really come out and say it, is that a lot of these extraterrestrials that we're seeing are outward manifestations of what we have inside. What we were talking about earlier with the Foo Fighters, the balls of light, the beings that the beings of light that the Bledsoe family interacted with. In my mind, those are outward manifestations of what we have inside. Because certain people will have over and over and over, they'll have these experiences, whereas the vast majority of people will have no experiences throughout their entire life. So what is it about those certain people that are having the experiences? I think that it's something inside.
I will totally agree with you there. I think, I'm trying to think of how to say this, saying it politely. I think a lot of, well, from one, there's been times I've seen on regular UFO shows, people maybe talking about abductions or weird UFOs experiences. When they start getting, if some of them get detailed, I have come across a lot of them where I was like, you know what, that sounds a lot like what I experience when I go into a deep meditation with my eyes closed. Mm-hmm. You just happen to experience it with your eyes open. I'm like, so, like, could it have been neither you came into contact, maybe we do have crafts that actually give off some sort of fucking EMF where that could fuck you up, or is it actually just all done on your own? But I do think a lot, unfortunately, when it comes to UFO stories, is either people misunderstanding what's going on and not realizing it's coming from inside them, or they know it's coming from inside them and they just spin a cute alien UFO story and get famous and make money off of it.
I would say that most people don't understand the...
Yeah. No, but I mean, I do think there's other people out there who truly know and just play off that shit.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think a lot of it is people not understanding, like you were saying. I do agree. I think most of it is that. But, because, like, there's times when I've watched people talk about when they thought they got abducted. Like, they'll talk about, like, they're pretty much seeing the black sun, and it feels like they're getting sucked out, and they see all these colors and these lights, and I'm like, it's the same shit I would see, in my meditations. I'm like, maybe you're just confused.
Well, a lot of people will say, like, they travel through their walls. They're sucked through the walls or through their ceiling, and, like, isn't that exactly astral projection?
That's what I've thought before, yeah.
Yeah.
Did that happen within inside yourself, or did you come across something that your surroundings helped aid in that? But I think a lot of it does get misunderstood. I think
Well,
when you said it comes from within, I even think a lot of that has to do with poltergeists and paranormal activity.
And then also looking at hallucinogens like mushrooms or DMT, how we talked about like the binaural beats or the hemisync tapes activate multiple parts of the brain. Maybe those hallucinogens are doing the same thing. Maybe those chemicals are going to multiple parts of the brain and accomplishing the same thing that the hemisync tapes would be doing.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's a big aspect to those tapes from the few that I had listened to. Is the different sounds, and you can definitely tell there's different tones going in different sides of the head and everything.
Mm-hmm. And you said that like you used those tapes, and it kind of got you to that headspace where you would start to zone out. It got you there.
Yeah, it got a lot quicker, in my opinion. Yes,
and more efficiently than your meditations.
Yeah, I thought I saw it as this would probably make things a lot easier for me than what I've experienced. Definitely,
like a cheat code.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I even think the guy that I had on from the Hidden Gateway podcast, I think he's even called it a cheat code.
Yeah,
that's funny. Yeah, but it's the best way to say it. Maybe that's what fucking Jay-Z was talking about in Devil Was a Lie with Rick Ross. Cheat code.
I don't get that reference at all.
No, it's just a shitty song that I just can't get out of my head for some reason. So, Ron, is there anything else that you wanted to cover?
No, I don't think so. I think that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah,
start using both halves of your brain, people.
Yeah, no, thank you. I really do think that is a huge part of the magic, actually, is all about. I even think, the Ark of the Covenant is even going into the whole thing with, hemi-syncing and all that shit.
Mm-hmm.
And like I was even going to say before, I wish I had my own computer. We were talking about, I wanted to say this, but I forgot. You were talking about, like, the reptiles and stuff. I wanted to show it, but it'd be a pain in the ass for me to try to find it online now. But I have it saved on my other computer. It's if you were to, like, cut the head, and like I said, you see the crossing of the eyes. There's even shit, like, if you were to cut the middle of your head off that way and kind of look down on someone's head and you see, like, everything for the eyes going in. There's even shit, like, on the sides where they almost look like two eyes. And then if you look down at the rest of their head, there's parts of it where it looks like my opinion, if I was to show you the picture, I think you would see it for sure, like those old reptiles. I don't know if they're from Sumeria or Babylonian. I get confused. Those reptile gods with those big eyes and they have their tongue sticking out. You can literally, in my opinion, see that if you were to cut your brain in half, too. That's inside your fucking head. That fucking big eyes and it looks like a fucking lizard tongue coming out. It's fucking really weird, dude.
We talk about magic being an extreme understanding of the psyche, that people that are using magic mostly just understand how human psychology works better than anybody else. Like the word media comes from Magi of Medes. The Magi were conscripted by the royalty, that whenever they needed to influence public opinion, they would cast a spell. And then they would, influence public opinion, use their propaganda, and accomplish whatever they wanted. And so that's where the word media comes from. And so the people that have a better understanding of human psychology than anybody else, they're able to use quote-unquote magic and influence people.
Yep.
So the people that understand how the brain works better than anyone else, they have the advantage.
That's why I think, like, even just like colors and sounds is so important, because all it is just different variations of wavelengths. And for all you know, maybe certain ones make you go into certain parts of your brain. You have no idea. So I think you nailed it with that, Ron. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I always love. It's what I was telling you before. Maybe I was confused, and I thought you said I got confused with writing a book and reading a book. I was actually a little confused about what we were covering. before I had you on, I'll totally admit it. I got it confused, but
myself.
like this was actually like once you told me exactly what it was, I was like, oh fuck yeah! I really think this shit is really fucking interesting, and as cheesy as it sounds, because it's not like really that big of a conspiracy thing, or it don't even have to look at it in a magic sense or an occult sense. But if you were to start maybe just Googling or looking into like your brain and your eyes and how shit works, I think you might start seeing just weird commonalities with stuff you've seen otherwhere else.
Yeah, and like what could be bad about getting a better understanding of yourself, but getting a better understanding of your brain?
Well, it doesn't sound like a cool, edgy thing to look up, or to study for a while, but it can get pretty interesting, especially if you're into symbolism and occultism and magic. I think if you start looking into the brain and the eyes and the ears, you'll start seeing reoccurring hand signs and shapes and symbols. Mm-hmm. So, and talking about this stuff, I think, I love this type of shit because it can get pretty fucking deep, pretty crazy, a lot of different theories. So I had fun, Ron. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anytime.
And thank you, everybody who was in the chat. We actually had a lot of stuff that I read off from the chat on this one. A lot of people had their own opinions and ideas, and that's why I love doing the lives, just to get everybody to jump in. Like I said earlier, definitely also check out Element Chat. Ron Diggity, he's like an OG up in there, and among the few others that are constantly active. Definitely check that out if you want. And thank you very much, Ron, for coming on. It's always good times having you on.
Always a pleasure.
For people who may not have known, I had him on. He's been on the Occult Rejects before for I covered the Scarlet Whore intros. I had him on, and he even covered a little bit of his own experience. And I did I have you on one other time already also?
Yeah, we discussed the Nephilim and Fallen
Yes,
Angels.
that's right. Okay, yes. And I have that you can check out. So Ron has been on before. If you haven't heard him before, go check out his other shit. Solid job. That's why he was on again today. Thank you again, Ron. I had a good time. Thanks to everybody who was in the chat. And everybody be well. Later.